Why can't you put the phone down? Why does one text from them undo 3 days of finally feeling okay? Why does your chest do that thing, that specific drop, the second their name shows up on the screen? And why, if you're honest, does some small part of you check for that name more than you'd ever admit out loud? You know exactly what they did. You could list it. The way they said one thing and meant another. The way an apology never quite arrived. The way you felt smaller after every conversation, not bigger. So here's the real question. If you know all of that, why are you still checking your phone for their name? You're not confused about the facts. You're confused about your own reaction to them. And that reaction is far stranger than you just love them too much. Here's the real answer. Your brain isn't broken. It's running a program that's thousands of years old, and someone else figured out, whether they meant to or not, exactly how to trigger it. Psychologists have a name for what you're feeling: trauma bonding. The term was popularized by therapist Patrick Carnes in the 1990s, and it describes something specific. A bond that forms not despite the harm, but because of the pattern the harm follows. Not constant cruelty. That would be easy to leave, something else. Cruelty mixed with warmth, in a sequence your brain can't predict. Think about the last time it happened. A cold, dismissive week. Then, out of nowhere, they were warm again, attentive, almost like the person you fell for in the first place. Did that relief feel bigger than any ordinary kindness should? It did. And that's not a coincidence. In the 1950s, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner ran a series of experiments on reinforcement schedules. He found that behavior isn't shaped most powerfully by consistent reward. It's shaped by unpredictable reward. Skinner used pigeons pressing levers for food. Give the pigeon food every single time it presses the lever, and it presses the lever calmly whenever it's hungry. But give the pigeon food only sometimes, on no fixed pattern, and something changes. The pigeon presses the lever obsessively, compulsively, long after the food stops coming. Nobody has ever written a sad poem about a vending machine. Put your coin in, get your soda every single time, and you feel nothing. You've never laid awake at 2 a.m. wondering if the vending machine still cares about you. Reliability is boring. Uncertainty is where your brain loses its mind a little, and Skinner's pigeons figured that out a lot faster than most of us do. This is called a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines so much more addictive than any game with predictable payouts. Now replace the lever with a relationship. Replace the food pellet with affection. Every time you get warmth after a cold stretch, your brain doesn't file it as ordinary affection. It files it as a reward you weren't sure was coming. And unpredictable rewards trigger a much larger dopamine response than predictable ones. Researchers studying dopamine and anticipation, including work from neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz, found that dopamine neurons fire most intensely not when a reward arrives, but when a reward is uncertain. Your brain isn't rewarding you for being loved, it's rewarding you for surviving the uncertainty. That's a very different thing, even though it feels identical from the inside. Is it starting to make sense why the good moments with a person who hurts you can feel more intense than good moments with someone stable? It's not because they love you better. It's because your nervous system is responding to the pattern, not the person. There's an older layer underneath this too, one that goes back to your earliest relationships. In the 1950s and 60s, psychiatrist John Bowlby developed what's now called attachment theory. He studied what happens to infants when a caregiver is inconsistent, sometimes present and warm, sometimes withdrawn or harsh. The infants didn't attach less to that caregiver, they attached more. They became hypervigilant, tracking the caregiver's mood constantly, working harder to earn the safety that wasn't guaranteed. Bowlby called this an anxious attachment style, and it doesn't stay in infancy. It becomes a template, a blueprint your nervous system reaches for automatically decades later, whenever a relationship starts to feel unpredictable in that same specific way. You weren't taught to chase inconsistency. Your nervous system learned a long time ago that inconsistency is simply what closeness feels like. In 1981, psychologists Donald Dutton and Susan Painter looked directly at abusive relationships and gave this exact pattern a formal name: traumatic bonding theory. They found two ingredients were enough to produce an intense, hard-to-break attachment, a power imbalance between the two people, and intermittent mistreatment rather than constant mistreatment. Take away either ingredient and the bond weakens. Constant cruelty with no power imbalance just produces resentment. Occasional cruelty with a real power imbalance produces something closer to devotion, which sounds backwards until you remember the pigeon and the lever. This is also unsettlingly why hostage victims sometimes defend their captors. The FBI first documented the pattern after a 1973 bank robbery in Stockholm, where hostages resisted rescue and later defended the men who held them. It got the name Stockholm Syndrome, but the mechanism inside it is identical to what happens in an abusive relationship, just compressed into days instead of years. Isolation, fear, then, unpredictably, small moments of kindness from the person controlling the fear. The brain latches onto the kindness as evidence of safety, because in that moment that person is the only source of any safety at all. You already live inside a smaller, tamer version of this every single day, and it has nothing to do with a relationship. It's the reason you check an app that hasn't buzzed in 20 minutes. Notifications aren't sent to you on a fixed schedule. They arrive unpredictably on purpose because the engineers behind them read the same Skinner research everyone else did. Your thumb doesn't refresh the app because you're weak-willed. It refreshes because somewhere in your skull, a very old system is running the exact same math. It ran for a caregiver, a captor, or a partner who runs hot and cold. The stakes are lower with an app. The wiring underneath is identical. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. None of this requires the other person to be some criminal mastermind. Most people who create trauma bonds aren't running a calculated plan. They're often repeating a pattern that was done to them without any awareness that they're doing it at all. That doesn't make it less damaging. It just means the explanation isn't evil genius. The explanation is a nervous system responding exactly the way nervous systems are built to respond in two people who never sat down and studied psychology. So why does it feel so hard to just leave, even once you can see the pattern clearly? Because seeing the pattern intellectually and feeling its pull are two separate systems in your brain. You can know with complete certainty that the good moments are engineered by unpredictability rather than affection. And your dopamine system will still fire the same way the next time inconsistency shows up. Insight doesn't turn off the reward circuit. It just gives you a narrator standing next to it, watching it happen, arms crossed, saying, "We both know how this episode ends." That narrator is more powerful than it sounds, though. Studies on recovery from trauma bonds consistently find that the strongest predictor of someone leaving isn't willpower in the moment. It's distance and structure, the same single dissenting voice effect that shows up in obedience research elsewhere. A friend who says the quiet part out loud, a new environment where the unpredictable pattern can't reach you daily. Time away long enough for the reward circuit to stop expecting the next unpredictable hit. Psychiatrist Judith Herman, who spent decades studying trauma recovery, found something similar in her clinical work. Safety has to come before understanding, not the other way around. You can hand someone every study in this video, and if they're still inside the unpredictable environment, the insight mostly just sits there, unused, while the reward circuit keeps doing its job anyway. Remove the unpredictability first. The understanding gets to matter after that, not before. Think about the moments in your life, ordinary and low stakes, where you've felt a small version of this. The friend who only texts back when you've almost given up on them and how good that reply feels. The boss whose rare praise means more to you than steady praise ever would from someone else. Even a video game, the kind where a rare item drops on no fixed schedule, keeping you playing one more round for a prize that might not even show up. None of these are trauma bonds, but they're built from the exact same wiring, which is why the pull, even in small doses, can feel so disproportionate to what actually happened. That's worth sitting with for a second. If a random loot drop in a video game can hijack your attention for hours, imagine what the same mechanism does when the unpredictable reward is a person telling you they love you. You're not weak for feeling this. You're not naive. and you're not choosing chaos on purpose. You have a nervous system that rewards uncertainty more than it rewards peace, because for most of human history, unpredictability in your environment was actually dangerous, and staying alert to it kept your ancestors alive. That same circuitry, aimed at a person instead of a predator, just produces a bond that feels like love and functions like a trap. None of this means you're stuck. It means the exit isn't going to come from wanting it hard enough in the moment the good version of them shows up, because that's precisely when the reward circuit is loudest. The exit comes earlier, in the ordinary hours before that moment, when you can still see the pattern clearly enough to build some distance around it. That's not weakness either. That's just working with the actual system you have, instead of the system you wish you had. So why can't you put the phone down? Why does one text undo 3 days of finally feeling okay? Now you know. It's not because you're weak, and it's not because they're irresistible. It's a very old, very predictable pattern finally being seen for exactly what it is.